More. I would like to share a little bit about a research project that I'm undertaking. I started this well over a year ago, and we're kind of in phase 2 of this research and project. First phase was developing an instrument to kind of assess where we are on some things in terms of staff tenure in relationship to pastoral transitions. And so the second phase now is many of you received my survey through John. I've got it out a few other ways. If you did not, at the end of this, I'm going to put the website up again, but I'm going to ask John, if you will, to send it out again to all of our members, because this will help me to go through the second phase, and then I'm going to try to expand to a future larger population and continue to get more data. But I thought I would share just a couple of things here about about this. Let me start with the rationale for this study. I've been in ministry for over 35 years, served in multiple. Like Kathy, I've had a lot of different titles in my jobs over the years, and so I've known a lot of people. And the role that I'm in now, I get to talk with a lot of folks. We are in a time of a lot of change in our churches, and our pastors are changing. I heard at the table this morning they think it's getting longer, but it's still, I think, about 2.5 years transitions for pastors. And so my concern, anecdotally, I kept hearing stories on my pastor left, and this is, I had to transition. I got a new pastor, and I don't think I'm on his team. I got a new pastor, and we're just not jihad, so I got to go look for another job. And so a lot of the information that I had gathered this far was stories and anecdotal, and I started looking. There's really not a lot of data out there. So that was one thing, is I wanted to find some real empirical data about what's happening for those of us who are secondary staff positions and not senior pastors. The second thing is all this transition, I'm concerned about the congregational health. There is clear evidence that the longer pastors stay and the longer staff people stay, the healthier churches will be. And when we have this constant churn and turnover in our churches, the possibility of building long-term ministry and healthy congregations diminishes. And so I think we need to do something, find out some causes and some solutions to help going forward. I also really began to, based on anecdotal information, I was really concerned about the support for secondary staff people. I think I've got to do some comparison, but my understanding is there's often a lot more support for senior staff who lose their jobs and are even forced terminated or go through transitions. I've not found any real support for secondary staff people. We're casualties of war, so to speak. And so I hope that this information will provide some resources going forward to help people who are in secondary staff position that are consequentially going through this thing. And then a personal experience, I went through a pastoral change, and I reached out to people to say, how do I manage this? And I had some good counsel and advice from others that have been through it, but there's not a handbook for how do you manage pastoral change as a secondary staff book. So I'm hoping we can find some best practices. I've gotten some really good information so far, and so provide some resources for people when their pastors say, I'm leaving and I've got a new one coming in. Here's some things that will help you to navigate your new circumstances. So in my research, I had 5 primary goals. We'll go through these real quick. One was to ascertain and collect data related to staff retention and tenure, if such data exists. Second was determine factors that influence staff retention associated with pastoral change, such as leadership style, ministerial experience, age, position, involvement in pastoral selection, and projected considerations. Third was to assess emotional, spiritual, vocational, and financial impact of unintended staff departures resulting from pastoral change. The number 4 was to determine possible resources that would improve staff retention, reduce transitional turmoil, promote pastoral team satisfaction, and make those available to staff, pastors, churches, and denominational entities. And then finally, to produce an assessment tool and approach that can be used to ensure and measure preparation for, process of, and response to pastoral transition. So those are my goals as I begin to flesh this out. I know that's a lot of data speak, so I'm not going to spend any time on there. But I wanted to show you just a little bit about how I've begun to visualize and put this together in terms of this process. There are 4 basic constituents that you'll see up there, populations that need to be considered. One was the departing pastor. That's one person who impacts what's going to happen. The second one is the actual staff that are in place. The other group constituency to consider is the church, the congregation, and the last one is the arriving pastor. So there are 4 considerations, 4 people that we kind of looking at. And then we're looking at the process is the departure of the pastor, the interim situation, the selection process, the arrival of a new pastor, and the decision that the staff makes about their response to those things. And so I know that's a lot. I'm just kind of setting the stage because, that just kind of let you know kind of my thinking about how to assess and gather this data. So I'm going to show you just a few things. What I'm sharing with you is I've got a lot more than this, but this is just some general trends that I see in the early responses that you might find informational and going forward. I hope my goal is after this is to collect all this. Maybe next year I'm on sabbatic, put it in some form of a publication that would be available to everybody. But these things are some things you might find there you go, might find interesting. Why did pastors leave? These were the numbers that we found, the people who reported their pastoral change. Right at 33% of the pastors leave to go to a new ministry. And almost 19% reported that they left in the midst of church conflict. They either didn't want to work through it or felt it was over beyond them or whatever. Just over 11% left because of a moral failing. And then there was this was surprising, less than 3 were retirement or death, illness or death, which was interesting. And in retirement, there was a smaller number in between there. So I think the reason a person leaves sets the stage for how interims are sometimes handled, how the staff responds, and how churches select their next pastor. So this information is just there's a lot more that I have, but that kind of gives you an idea of the kind of information that I was trying to gather. The next thing that I found that I considered was how the churches managed administration and pulpit ministry in their churches. And the typical response was basically the existing staff led the ministry, day-to-day operations, and a pulpit person was hired. A preacher was hired to fill the staff. Only about 38% of the churches retained an intentional interim. And of those, 15.6 were full-time, and those numbers are those numbers matching up? I may have one number off there. So some were about full-time and part-time. That may be 20 to 25%. I might have a typo on that. 25% were full-time, about 12% were part-time interims. But we see a smaller proportion actually being intentional about how to manage and navigate and prepare for the next pastor in our churches. The next part is the part that's really discouraging. The involvement, and I asked multiple questions here, so I'm summarizing some of this, but the staff involvement in the selection process. And almost 85%, the existing staff have little to no involvement in the selection process. Some said there were no involvement at all. About 40% said they had their involvement was passive, in that people on the committee might come ask their opinion about something, but that was just a contribution of opinion, no formal decision making, nothing involved in the actual process. Less than 2% said they were on a committee or involved intricately in the selection process of the new pastors. So then the next one, there's a lot of stuff in there, and we're not going to take time to look at that, but I think that's going to speak a lot to this next slide, which is this is probably one of the most concerning things to me that I see so far, is that, I go back one, that I ask about potential pastors, new incoming pastors, getting with existing staff to ask questions about their new ministry that they were about to embrace. And these were the things this was yes or no questions. And so these were little scary ones. The new pastor sought and expected time with the staff to discuss the culture, philosophy, strategy, and future of the church. Almost 2/3 said there was no conversation with the incoming pastor about those areas. The new pastor sought to determine strengths and weaknesses of the staff, how he might integrate them into the existing staff. 68.3% no's. The new pastor solicited information about the history, ministry, or direction of the church from the staff rather than just the committee. 60% no's. So overwhelmingly, incoming pastors really most of them did not even take time to talk to the existing staff about anything. We would probably say these are pretty important things to know about the church you're going to enter. And they did very little homework from the people who are actually in those ministry environments to assess how they might be able to do that. I think this is probably one of the biggest areas that we could, I have to be careful. I'll make an anecdotal personal story. That was one of the things that was true in my personal transition story. And I actually reached out to say, through the committee, the search committee, can we plan a time? Can we meet in a neutral site to have a conversation? And that was rejected because I tried to take the initiative from the staff side. And so this is a little concerning for me that we have people transitioning and they're not doing, as pastors, and they're not even doing their homework about the churches that they're about to take leadership, of which they're about to take leadership. Got to get that grammar right. Okay. So then I just got a couple more things that I want to share with you. I anticipated, based on my anecdotal information, that the departure rate was closer to 80% after a new pastor comes. And I've been partly accurate on that so far. And what I found is there's about 77% actually leave when a new pastor comes, but it's past the 2-year mark. I thought it would be within those first couple years. And so almost 80% of the people leave, but it looks like it's in year 2, between year 2 and year 3 when that happens. So you see here how long people stuck it out. That's not a right word. How long people stayed after the new pastor came. Freudian slip. All right. Less than 3 months, 16%. So most people, they're already making an exit strategy either during the interim or when the pastor is coming on staff. Less than 3, you see 10%, 3 to 6 months, 6 to 12 months, 10%, 12 to 18 months. And then you see that big number, 49% say, I tried to 2 years. And I think there's a new staff I'm trying to stay here, I'm trying to work this thing out, but eventually almost double that number end up leaving after that period of time. And so there again, we're back to another interim situation. So that's that's just a little bit of some of the snippets that I've gathered so far, and it's not from as robust a population yet that I would like to get. So I hope you will, when you get the next email from John about how to connect with that, if you'll take time, let me just do it real quick before I do this last slide. How many of you have been through, as a secondary staff, a pastoral transition? Almost everybody in the room has been through one. So this is a big issue for most of us in our field. So, all right, here's the part that's also, I hope to be able to address in some meaningful way regarding consequences. And this is a part that bothers me on a ministerial level. And so here's a couple of things. Some reported negative outcomes from transitions, emotional hurt and disappointments. That's kind of a given. I don't think most people say, hey, this was one of the best things that happened to me. I just needed to, because there's a lot of, between miscommunication, unrealized expectations, there's just a lot of disappointments that happen and the hurt that comes from that. And we're all human, and so a lot of reporting on that front. Financial loss and economic setbacks. Everybody who left, many of the people who reported leaving found another ministry setting, but there are some that did not. On another anecdotal story, I had a person report to me, I've been through three of these and I can't get a job because it looks like I can't keep a job. But I didn't leave because I wanted to. I left because my pastor changed and he wanted new staff. So now my resume is damaged because it looks like I can't keep a job, and churches are fearful about hiring me. So there's stories like that are out there that are unintended consequences of this kind of work. Withdrawal from the ministry. That's the part that concerns me too. People who have a genuine sense of call, because they get so discouraged or can't find another job, end up getting out of ministry. And that hurts as a person who trains ministers, we just think this is a calling for life, and we want to help you to be able to do that for the rest of your life. All right, and then the positive outcomes though, I think because we are God called, we're trying to follow Christ in obedience, these were some positive things that came out. There is no financial support at the associational, state, or denominational level for staff people who are either forced terminated or have to transition out of a position, that everybody, there's pretty high reporting that people felt like there was support from those entities to help people move into a new ministry environment, which was a positive thing. They also felt the same thing from a network of relationships. By the way, that's why these kind of meetings are critical, to help, because we just saw that. It's going to happen to you if it hasn't yet. Many people reported 2 or 3 pastoral transitions. Having a network of people that you can go to and say, hey, I'm going through a transition. Do you know a place that I can go? And some of y'all have probably already had those conversations this meeting. And so that's why this is important type of environment. Most of the respondents said, my faith in God grew because I had to rely and depend on Him to go through this. And their faith, there was a faith expansion. Some of them reported learning new skills. I realized I needed to learn, go back, do something. Many people reported I took on a different role or different responsibility in my current environment. I stayed on staff, but I had to do something different, or I had to learn something different to go get a new job, those kind of things. And then there's a self-awareness. Going through that crisis, help people, they had to do introspection and say, who am I? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What are my failings? Am I doing something that I need to do different and make myself indispensable? Well, I hope that's been helpful to you guys a little bit. When you get the next email from John McClendon and say, will you take this survey? We'll send one out again. Please take a few moments and fill in. You'll help be able to add to my data if we can. Next.